Fulcrum Care, we're incredibly privileged to work with people who are passionate about what they do. The Pivotal People interviews will be talking to people that are involved in the care industry with the passion and the forward thinking that we have. We are speaking to people who are on the periphery sometimes of what we do, from some people from the legal professions, people from consultancies, people from who are providers that haven't worked in care before, and we're finding out about what brought them into the industry. Those pivotal people have the same heart and soul in care as we do that have grown up in care, I suppose. And we find their stories incredibly interesting, and we hope you do too. Today we're talking to Paul Ridout from Ridout Professional Services, and Paul is a very influential person in the care industry. You've been working in the care industry for many years, and
52.
You are 52 years, goodness, and you are the go-to person for crisis management, and you are the defender and protector of care providers. I love that quote. I think it came from your website, but that is exactly what you do. You are there in a crisis, and you support the care providers with regulatory issues, and you are the go-to person. What I really want to know today, Paul, is how did you get there? Where did you start, and what brought you into the care industry?
Well, when I started, the care industry didn't really exist. And let's just put that into context. Nursing homes had been registered since 1927. And by 1971, when I first became involved, they were registered under a piece of legislation from the 1930s, and they paid a fee of £1 to be registered with the local health authority.
Goodness, that was...
I was then an articled clerk in a law firm in Mayfair, and I was acting towards the end of my articles. That's what we now call a trainee solicitor. And I acted for a couple who had decided to buy a nursing home, of which I had never heard. This was probably in November 1971, round about then. And they were buying a crummy old terraced house nursing home in Earl's Court, which I don't suppose exists anymore, called the Pennywern Nursing Home. It's next to Earl's Court Station. The Pennywern Nursing Home turned out to be in a bit of a mess.
Okay.
It wasn't properly registered, it wasn't properly operating, and it needed to be sorted out with the Kensington and Chelsea Health Authority after we'd purchased it, and the consequent litigation that arose about the damage to the price. So we managed to sort all that out. I learnt a lot about the regulation of nursing homes in 1971-72, and that was useful, and that was really how I got into it. And then this client became influential in the nursing home sector, which was nothing like it is now, absolutely nothing like it is now. And there were no real non-nursing homes. So they became big noises in something called the Registered Nursing Home Association. And they approached me and asked me to be the solicitor to the Registered Nursing Home Association, which I agreed to do because being qualified by then, I qualified in April 1972, so being qualified, it was a good way of building connection and practice. And what I did was go around the country with them to visit members of the nursing home and go to council meetings of the association and talk about interesting things like dirty kitchen floors and malfunctioning nurse call systems and all of the things that have electrified my life ever since. And that led to a few clients. The legal profession saw nursing homes and subsequently care homes as an opportunity for conveyancing fees. They weren't much interested in what went on inside, and to tell you the truth, it hasn't much changed.
No.
People are a bit frightened about what goes on inside care homes. They don't know, and they think it's really just a nice large real estate and you can swap it into anything else. Anyway, that's what happened. So I built that expertise, and I suppose the years rolled on and there was a bit of work and there was a bit of, and then towards the end of the 1970s, matters changed because a failing government, this one was a Labour government, in an attempt to win votes, decided that it was going to allow people to opt to live in care homes at state expense, funded by social security benefit, funded through the central government, the Department of Health and Social Security, as it then was. And you could go into a care home and the local DSSS, as they called it, would then assess you, and they would pay whatever the care home said was the market rate in the local area. So this is entered into a whole new golden age for care homes, probably much remembered. And this developed, and I didn't have much to do with this because essentially people bought care homes, they filled them up with people. If the people hadn't got any money, I mean, traditionally families looked after their loved ones, and people would turn up with 10 bob notes and half crowns and things and pay the fees at the end of each week. But here was this golden opportunity that basically anybody with no money could be accommodated in a small sort of old people's club. Remember, back in the 1980s, the client base were lovely ladies with inadequate husbands who wanted to live in large houses. And the Registered Nursing Home Association annual ball was hilarious because these ladies, all of whom were well padded, sort of produced the husbands on the dance floor and wheeled them around, much to my wife and my hilarity, really, to watch it going on.
Marvelous.
And then slowly things changed. The regulation came in. I mean, in those days, solicitors thought conveyancing was wonderful, and they didn't really want anything to do anything else. So I decided there was an opportunity, and I'd made the decision in collaboration with my wife that I would be the person that would travel anywhere with my law books in the country, including Wales and Scotland, and not so much until later Northern Ireland, but arrive and sort out these sorts of problems, social security benefit problems, which were critical to getting the right degree of income, because by this time, the golden years of you could just nominate what you charged and people would pay it had gone. And so we were stuck in a difficulty where the financing of the business was becoming more and more stressful. In the 1980s, nice middle class people chose to go and live in nursing homes because it was a nice way of being looked after, maybe at state expense, and avoiding the responsibilities. And then we saw a gradual increase. And the nice padded ladies and their grass-cutting husbands were replaced by sharp-suited accountants and bankers who started to dominate the feature. And we started to see care homes being listed on the stock market, usually failing because it's not a good stock market investment at all. It's a bond market investment, if anything, or a personal private investment. Care homes are essentially a cottage industry, and they work better when they're run by people of highly motivated vocation who are personally involved. In the early days, the people I worked for, they used to rock up in their care homes at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they would find out who was asleep and who was sometimes doing other things. I remember a case when the sleeping matron was discovered in flagrante delicto by the light switch going on. The video was quite amusing.
Oh my goodness.
But people found out about that, and they were in control, and there was a certain degree of respect. When you develop into groups of hundreds of care homes, the whole thing is dependent upon the quality of the local management. Whatever the bigger companies may say, their systems, their policies, their procedures are only as good as what's happening on the ground. And now we've got we've had a various iteration of regulators. And I used to act for regulators until 2002, and then I stopped because it's very dangerous to only have one client. And you couldn't act for a national regulator and then act against a national regulator. So infinite clients who can always be replaced by other clients because all kinds of things happen. People die, people sell, people move on, people don't like you anymore. That's the nature of professional practice. So I became care home providers only. And there was a need because regulators, as we moved into national regulation, regulators became a different animal. In the 80s and the 90s, they were mates with the care home providers. You know, clients of mine who ran, let's not say the county because she's probably still alive, but she knew who was good, she knew who was bad, and she knew who was downright ugly. And she knew how to manage them, and she would drop in and she'd say, have you ever thought of doing this? Let's have a cup of tea. Yeah. I mean, I hanker after those days.
Yeah.
That's missing. That's a huge missing part, which would be the single best thing, rather than these sort of bossy ladies and gentlemen who come in with the feeling that they're never wrong and know more than anybody else about other people's businesses and other people's needs and wants and desires. So that's how it all came about.
Absolutely,
it's grown from there.
Absolutely fascinating.
I remember once going to a home up in Northumberland, where, of course, in those days you had this terrible circle of old people looking at the television. And I cannot think what CQC would say about this, but right in the middle of it all was an Amazonian blue macaw parrot.
Yeah.
Sitting in amongst all the old people. And from every now and then, not with any notice being paid to any of the old people, this parrot would get up, fly across and change the channel on the television set with its beak.
Oh my goodness.
And I hate to think what would be said about this now from all kinds of points of view.
Yeah.
But that was the sort of thing you found, and that was the way it was.
Yeah.
And it was a completely different thing. And I think we've lost something. And and it's getting worse. We've got a really difficult regulator.
Yes.
Who seems to think it's important to prosecute and fine people rather than helping them meet the needs of people and through difficulties that arise, and a sector that's become obsessed with profit rather than vocation. Let's lighten regulation. Let's take it back to people working together. In the 1980s, we said 2 years in a nursing home, 5 years in a care home.
Yeah.
Very, very broadly. Now those figures have come down dramatically.
Definitely. Yeah, I've seen that myself.
So a lot of people can probably afford somewhere between 250 and 400,000 pounds to go into somewhere nice to be comforted. But the local authorities are not going to provide that. But the regulator has no sympathy for the pressures that are different. They are expecting that higher standard, which can't be provided, and then they land on people. And of course, people have pressures, and they run out of money. Yeah. We all have these pressures, I mean, that's sad, isn't it?
That's really interesting. That's been a fascinating talk, and I think you will. A lot of people out there will be really interested to hear that. A lot of people out there are very interested in you and in your organisation. You maybe don't realise how interested, but we all are. So thank you.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. I'm glad we're having an impact.
You are, very much so. Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming over and seeing us.